I mean, we're a small group, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation because that's sort of what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not really that married to it, and I'd be much more interested in sort of trying to respond to the kind of questions you came with. So my guess is that you didn't just sort of happen here on Monday night because you have nothing better to do, but we're looking for some discussion, some information, whatever, about specific issues. So I'm more than happy to kind of go wherever you want to go. And again, we won't be stuck with the PowerPoint if we ever get it pretty quickly, but I think we're
Getting more.
Okay, super. So just a little bit about what I do, just to give you some background. I'm a family doctor by training. I spent quite a bit of time being a country doctor. After that, I left and did some training in adolescence. I went to Minnesota to train in adolescence and expected, and there was a lot of sort of sexuality stuff. That was the key thing. Came back to Ottawa armed with all my sexuality stuff and saw mainly eating disorders when we came in. But that was 20 years ago. And over the last 20 years, things have really evolved. And I guess the what I learned is that it's whether we're talking about sexuality or whether we're talking about eating disorders or suicidality or mood disorders or whatever, it really boils down to the same thing. And that's why some people think I'm really smart, because they think I can deal with all those different issues. But the real message is there's only one issue, and that issue is the development of the adolescent. Were all of you at Dr. Norris's talk? Yeah. So you will have heard that adolescence is an incredibly tumultuous period. That's true. It's second only to age 0 to 1 in terms of the amount of change, the amount of growth that takes place. And those changes are multiple. They're in the physical, obviously. That's everybody. When you think of puberty, you think about pimples and pubic hair and all kinds of stuff like that, hormones. But also cognitively, and as Mark was relating to, emotionally, morally. These kids are going through incredible change. The change doesn't always happen in sync. So you may have some kids who are very physically mature, but cognitively immature. This is particularly true of the early maturing female. We'll get into that a little bit more. But when things are out of sync, then it puts kids at risk because sometimes their physical doesn't match their cognitive, doesn't match their emotional, and it makes them vulnerable.
I apologize. I'm just going to turn the lights off. It seems to be coming out, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I'm sorry. It's a bit I know. Sorry about that. Maybe a little more intimate than we. Is this part of the talk?
Yes, sexuality talk. Yeah. Well, you know what? Great. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. Okay.
Did you download?
Yeah, they're both on. Yeah.
They are. Okay.
This is my French talk. Okay. At any rate, so what I was getting at is that kids are going through a lot of change, lots of stuff, and we can talk in more details about that.
Is it possible to? Should we just? See that at all?
Turn the back button.
Okay, so then with all this stuff going on, there are 4 tasks, and Mark again alluded to them. And those tasks are our identity, which is critical, and a big part of who one is who one is sexually. And a second one is autonomy, where people become not independent, but interdependent from parents. And the difference there is that it's not that, kids, families and kids were all kind of under the same nest, and then suddenly the kid becomes a teenager, and now suddenly he or she needs to be independent. It's not that. The goal, and again, I'll explain it in more detail, but the goal is really for there to be a gradual handoff of responsibility and trust from parent to child, to the point where the youth does become more confident about their ability to stand up on their own 2 feet and take responsibility for themselves, however, with the parents as consultants. And that's a critical piece. We're not, you know, whenever we talk about independence, parents sort of feel, well, they're cutting us off, and it's not true. There was a question raised about confidentiality in the larger auditorium, and again, many parents are concerned that confidentiality puts a wedge between their kids and themselves, and I would argue that. I think it supports the autonomy of the adolescent, but if it's used properly, and I emphasize that when I talk to students and residents, I try to make sure that they don't hide behind confidentiality to sort of avoid talking to the parents. It's the opposite. It's oftentimes the kids don't want the parents to know. Why? Because they're embarrassed, and they're afraid of what the parents might think of them, given a particular event or behavior or what have you. So our task is to find a way to allow the youth to connect with their parents, because the parents are the primary support system. So that's the autonomy piece. It's a handover. The third piece is relationships. And again, if you recall, we were all adolescents once, I would venture a guess. And
sorry, I'm not finding it. Should we download it?
yeah. And you have to stay.
Yeah.
And so, and if you think about it, when kids are starting to move away from the family a little bit, they need to be part of something. They belong to something, and that's the peer group. So they have to feel accepted, belonging, what have you. And that's why all the kids look the same and talk the same and like the same music. I mean, that's the only reason I like Justin Bieber, I assure you. And it's because that way they can fit in. You know, if I look like them, then I am like them. And it's very, very critically important for.
So we have a choice.
Okay. You want to see, or you want to?
That's right. You want the lights?
Okay. Do you have your flashlights?
Are you?
Okay, never mind. You know, the slides are beside the point. I'm far more. Self-esteem, right? Okay, I'm just going to see what I was going to do. Okay. So we go from, and that's why teasing is so important, and that's why young people who find themselves or are found by others to be a little bit different, you know, don't quite fit in, are really a target for being teased, and that teasing is really potentially scarring. We see a lot of kids years later who will revert back, or refer back, I should say, to a negative teasing experience, and that's partly at least an explanation of the difficulties that are happening. But they move on from that sort of herd effect, right? They move on into into closer relationships, smaller groups, paired relationships, and the ultimate goal of this particular task is intimacy. And intimacy, what is intimacy?
Close relationship.
Yeah, closest. Doesn't mean sex, necessarily, good, but ideally, intimacy is the ability to share emotionally and possibly physically with somebody with whom you've developed a type of relationship. And then the fourth task, so the first was identity, second was interdependence, third was peer relationships, and the fourth is also crucially important, and that's how they do in school. The ability to be successful in school, and to be able to begin to plan for the future in terms of a vocation, in terms of a job that may support me and a family, if that's what my intention is. And these are four tasks that are critical to achieve during the adolescent period. Why am I talking about this? This is why. Because, and I'm quoting this fellow called Richard McKenzie, who's a physician on the West Coast, head of the Children's Hospital in LA. He said, behavior is the yardstick, American, against which adolescent development is measured. Okay, so it's my favorite quote in the whole wide world. Okay, behavior is the yardstick against which adolescent development is measured. So what does that mean? That means when we're confronted with a behavior, right? We're adults and we get really upset with some of the behaviors that our kids are presenting to us. But what's really critical is that we remember that the reason this behavior is there is because there's a developmental task that hasn't been